Hey guys, what's up? Pit Marthroy here, and welcome to Mario Superstar Baseball for the Nintendo GameCube. It's a pretty good way through the summer of 2024, and what better time to go play some baseball, and, actually, now that I've got free time, maybe redo one of these projects again. It has been a hot minute, hasn't it, since I've really posted anything on here. Sorry about that. Regardless, a lot of the Mario sports games recently I've noticed just kind of don't seem to have the same charm that the older ones did. I'm looking at like Mario Tennis Aces, Mario Golf Super Rush. They just don't have the charm that like original Mario Golf or Toadstool Tour did, that this game or Super Sluggers did, that the original Mario Tennis did. And while I don't think the charm is the sole reason that the games, in my opinion, are not as good, I'm sure it's probably one contributing factor of a couple at least. Regardless, this is one of the more popular projects that I did over the years, probably because at the time there weren't very many playthroughs of this game, and the game's actually kind of hard and also pretty complex, which is a bit weird, but it's true, it is. So I wanted to do a more complete project. So, along with the editing, some things I'm going to do that you'll see in the sidebar now, I'm going to be beating every single difficulty of challenge mode, and I'm going to be beating the easiest difficulty and the second easiest difficulty 2 times. The reason for that is so that we can show off all 6 teams and unlock all the hidden characters for exhibition mode. I'm also going to be doing bios of characters starting with episode 2, you'll be seeing those. Mostly just to talk about a character, what their strengths, weaknesses are, if I think they're any good or not, where I would recommend putting them on the field, that type of thing. And I might also do a second round of these bios later on, potentially, to see if any characters changed after we've completed the game, just to be like, hey, this character's better than I thought they were. They're worse than I thought they were, because a lot of characters over the years have definitely changed from what I initially thought of them when doing this project. I'm also going to be doing how-tos for getting each character to become a superstar through challenge mode. If you don't know what that is, you'll be seeing that probably in episode 2, going over what that refers to. It's essentially a very complex mechanic for each individual character, but we'll talk about that when we get there. I'll also be talking about how to get every character to become an MVP in exhibition mode. Though that is a lot easier to do. For both the MVPs and for making characters superstars and maybe other things, I'm thinking about making those additionally being YouTube shorts, where you'll get like a quick minute snippet so you don't have to wade through all of the project itself and seeing, hey, how do I make Toad become a superstar? How do I do that for Birdo? How do I do that for Hammer Bro? For any of those characters, really. So potentially look out for those, and we'll go over how to make those a little bit easier, hopefully. I'll also be talking about how to get every character in the game, including for exhibition mode, how to get every item in the game, and an in-depth discussion on every single minigame. That said, there is going to be one thing that I am not going to do in this project, and that it will be 100%ing the game. The reason for this is some of the challenges in this are super luck-based. And while I will still be explaining how to best set yourself up to do these, the luck required for some of them, it's just going to be this is your way to maximize your chances, but it will be just that, a chance. And we'd be sitting here for literal months in some cases, so just don't expect 100%. We're doing what I call reasonable percent. We'll be getting a fair few characters to Superstar, but some of them I'm just going to be talking about how to do that. If that seems a little bit dumb, why will be explained, and if you already know why, you're probably thinking of things like catch a booted ball, for example. That said, for this first episode, it's going to be a little bit shorter than what I'm going to try to keep every single video. I'm going to try to go for about 30 minutes, potentially a little bit less per episode, but if baseball games run long due to being in overtime and stuff like that, then, there's not much you can do about that, sorry. But I'm going to attempt to keep it under 30 minutes for each episode. That being said, I'm going to release this video as well as episode 2 back-to-back. So if you're watching this and you watched all the way through, there's a good chance episode 2 might already be out at this point. The reason I'm going to be doing 2 episodes is, although I do want to see the comments and be able to adjust for anything in decently real time, this first episode is going to be predominantly the practice mode, talking about how baseball works and in specifics how Mario Superstar Baseball works. This will be core mechanics. The only thing that a player that's played this before might not know is I'm going to be talking about common mistakes that people make when playing the game. So you might want to stick around for that. Very quickly going over this menu, Exhibition game is free play for yourself against an AI or yourself against another human player. You can pick all your characters, pick all of your, what arena you want, all that kind of stuff. Challenge mode is essentially your story mode. Toy field is an additional mode that admittedly I'm not too big a fan of, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. You can practice the minigames in minigame mode. Practice mode is learning how to play the game. Your records will show stuff from exhibition game in terms of getting your characters to MVP. It will show your challenge modes in terms of what difficulties you've won and if you've gotten anybody to superstar status. Toy field will show your current records in toy field. Minigames will show your records in minigames, including some that we have not yet unlocked, as well as your medals for Grand Prix. And lastly, of course, we've got our options at the bottom, which are just changing the music to on or off, changing the rumble to on or off, or changing how you want the sound to sound. That's basically it for the main menu. Now, let's get into practice, shall we? That being said, as this is loading, if there is anything that I mentioned, or that I did not mention, that you would like me to show, then just let me know in comments. Like I said, I'm going to be reading those and probably working on recording 2 episodes a week, roughly. I might do a bit more frequent, depending on how many comments pop up, but just bear in mind, if something does not get discussed immediately, it's probably because I'm a few episodes ahead. That's why. So baseball, how's it work? Well, I'm going to let Lakitu do the explanation on the bottom. I'm not just going to read what he's saying. You can just read that yourself, unless you're listening in the background. The goal of baseball is to score more points than the opposing team. There are 2 sides to each inning in the game, an offense and a defense. The offense side tries to score, the defense side, unsurprisingly, tries to stop them. So, obviously, you want to be on the side where you get the opportunity to score, but while you're on the defense side, then you're trying to block them in order to get control of the batter's box again. How do you do that? By getting your opponents out. Every time you get 3 outs in an inning, it will move the inning onto the next half, either from the top of the inning to the bottom, or from the bottom of the inning to the top of the next inning, provided that the game didn't just end right then and there because the game was over. So in order to do that, you need to get outs. The first way to do this by getting a batter out is by striking them out. That is caused by throwing the ball over the batter's box. As you can see right here, that little pentagon is the home run plate. By throwing the ball successfully to where the batter does not hit it 3 times. You can get strikes by keeping the ball inside of the lines on the pitcher's mound. I'm going to throw a ball here intentionally so you can see what that doesn't look like. There's a ball right there. But if they swing at it regardless and do not hit it, that will result in a strike. 3 strikes will result in an out. So striking out is one way that you can get your outs up to 3, as it were. You can throw multiple different kinds of pitches. You can throw a regular one just by tapping A. You can throw a charge pitch by holding down A. If you release A with good timing, you can throw an incredibly fast fastball, which it's having us do right now. You can also move freely on the batter's box, going left and right. One thing they don't tell you is you can hit L to recenter. This is very important for both the pitching mound and the batter's box, so bear it in mind. You can also curve your pitches after they've been thrown by hitting left or right. You can do this with most, but not all characters. And let's go ahead and finish out this last pitch here. The other possible thing for a batter to do in terms of getting strikes is by hitting the ball into a foul zone. The foul zones are those white lines that are jutting out from the outside of the boxes. If somebody does not hit the ball within those lines, then it will result in a foul ball. This will give them a strike unless they are at 2 strikes, in which case it will not give them a strike or a ball. They will just swing, or you'll just do another pitch and they'll potentially swing at it again. Balls result whenever the ball does not stay inside of the little boxes that you see, and also the batter does not swing at it. Should you pitch 4 balls, then you will walk the batter. This means that they will automatically move to first base, and if somebody's on that base, they'll move to second, as there cannot be multiple people on the same base at any given time. You want to typically try to avoid walking somebody unless you are really confident that they're going to hit the ball over the fence for a home run. The last type of pitches are star pitches. Every single character in the game does have one of these. Captains, co-captains, and non-captains, as I will refer to them. Captains will use 1 star power for their star pitch or star swing. Co-captains and non-captains will use 2. The captains and co-captains star pitches, like with their star swings, are typically going to be more fancy than the non-captains, but they do have various different types of pitches that they can do, which we'll be seeing in a later episode when I talk about that. It's one of those things that we'll use to kind of fill whenever there's not additional info to talk about per episode. But since this is episode 1, needless to say, there's a fair bit to talk about. You can use these star pitches and swings as long as you have the required star power for them. Typically, your team will start with 5. Potentially, they can start with less, but we'll see that when we get into an actual game in Episode 2. Moving on to batting, where we're playing on the offense side. How do you get points? Well, you get your runner back to home. You can move them freely in the batter's box like you could with a pitching mound. You can swing the bat with A. You can charge the swing by holding down A, so the controls are very similar to pitching in that regard. You want to try to hit the ball, of course, without getting it knocked out. Either physically by the ball, I guess that's also technically a possibility, but you want to try to avoid getting those outs. So what you want to do is hit the ball, keep it inside the foul lines, and make sure that somebody does not catch it in order to result in an out. The different ways to get outs we'll talk about when we get to fielding. For now, we're just going to focus on the batting. These shots that Luigi are throwing is obviously very easy to hit, which is why I'm getting perfects every time, as he's just throwing a slow ball directly down the middle of the field. So of course the ball's not hard to hit. If I move slightly, you can see that the little window that showed up went from perfect to nice. Here's the perfect one again. And of course, if you hit a ball perfectly, it will go a little bit farther than it would with a nice, and if you don't get anything on there, then it will go even less distance. Now, of course, we're going to be charging, which will build up power. One of the biggest mistakes that people make while playing this game is always doing charge swings. There are plenty of characters that will do better just hitting the ball normally without charging. The ball does go farther in almost every instance, yes, and it will almost always result in a home run if you can do it exactly correctly, which is hard but doable. But that said, you'll notice, as when I charge here and hit the ball is in the air for way longer than it was the other swings, so if it does not go over the fence, and I'll move out of the perfect zone to indicate this, this will give more time for people to get underneath the ball and catch it before it hits the ground. Like so. Somebody could have easily caught that, for example. Center field could have caught that. No problem if there was somebody there. So, bear in mind, this is sort of high-risk, high-reward type of behavior. That was barely inside the home run. It is high-risk, high-reward, and charge swinging is not always the best thing to do. Again, remember, Luigi is throwing slow pitches directly down the center of the box, so of course these are not difficult to hit. But not everybody's going to be doing that, I would hope. If I move slightly outside of that range that I'm going for, all of a sudden that swing doesn't look as impressive now, does it? So bear that in mind in swinging. It's not always the best thing to do to charge. Same thing with pitching, really. The idea with, pitching is varying it up. Bunting, you will almost never see me do unless a challenge requires me to do it. Bunting is done by holding down B, and as you just saw, the ball goes basically nowhere. So why would you want to do this? This is essentially a sacrifice play, like 99% of the time. This is the idea of you are essentially getting a guaranteed hit with the ball physically against the bat, but you are sacrificing your current batter either because you're trying to advance another person that's already on base, because you're not confident with whatever batter you have, or a combination of both. I almost never recommend this, again, unless it's required by the game for a star mission or a scout mission. We'll talk about those in Episode 2. Otherwise, don't do this. This is easily going to be picked up by probably either the pitcher or the catcher, and thrown to first base to tag you out. Lastly, the star swing. This is pretty much identical to the star pitch in terms of how it works. Captains, co-captains, and non-captains can use this. For captains, it'll cost you 1 star. For everybody else, it'll cost you 2. The only real difference here is that the star swings themselves in terms of what they do can vary between character for the pitches. We'll talk about what just happened there in a second. So the fireball pitch and fireball swing Mario has are pretty identical, but not all of them are that way. They're going to be close in some regards, but not always exactly the same. And it is worth noting that non-captain characters do have a star swing. It does basically nothing, so don't do that with your non-captains. With pitching, it might be viable in some instances. With swinging, no, just don't do it. You're wasting your star power for doing that. As you saw a second ago, though, if you have full star gauge and hit a star swing exactly right, it will basically result in a home run, provided it's not a foul ball. This will completely drain your star power, though, and the only chance you're really going to do outside of this practice mode is going to be completely by accident. It does have to be a charge shot, though. Note, with the star pitches and star swings, you do not actually have to charge in order to get those star swings. It's just for that little special thing that I showed there. And it actually doesn't count as a star swing in this, so I'm not going to do it again. These have different effects. Play around with them. Check out the character bios when they show up for each character, and you'll kind of see what those do. Alright, fielding. Probably the most important thing to do in the game, as while you're being a good pitcher is important, inevitably somebody's going to hit the ball, so you're going to have different ways to get them out. A fair bit of the fielding is done automatically. Whatever the little pointer finger that's above a character is, that will show you who you're in control of. This will typically be the person either with the ball or closest to the ball, whichever the case may be. You can select a base with up, down, left, and right to throw the ball, which in some instances can seem counterintuitive, and I'll explain why in a second when I say which direction is which. Down will throw it to home plate, right will throw it to first base, up will throw it to second base, and left will throw it to third base. If you press a direction if you press A without a direction, meaning that it will still throw, it will throw it to shortstop, which is the person in between either first and second or second and third. There we go. So you can practice throwing right here if you want to. The reason I say this can potentially be a bit counterintuitive is if something gets thrown into the outfield, like, way deep into the field, you would have to, in order to throw it to second base, you would press up and A to throw the ball down, which seems weird, but that is what you would have to do. So it can be a little counterintuitive and does take a tiny bit of practice to get used to. As it shows right here, if you throw the ball to first base before the runner gets there, they are forced out because they can't stay on home plate and they have to make it to at least first, so it's just automatically an out. If a ball gets sent into the air, it is live until it hits a wall or the ground, and if somebody catches it before it does any of those, then it's called a fly out. I'll probably just call it an out. It can also be called an infield fly if it's within the bases. So those are different ways to get outs. You can get outs by striking somebody out. You can get outs by catching the ball before it hits the ground. You can tag them out physically with the ball if you're running, which it didn't show here. And you can force them out by throwing the ball to first base before they get to first base. Those are the different ways. You can get multiple outs at the same time, of course, by getting double or even triple plays, which you'll probably see, likely, pretty quickly, both against me and against my opponents. But we'll see those in episode 2. Dashing. You can also dash by tapping B repeatedly. This also occurs when running, and that little smoke cloud will appear behind you. It makes your character go faster, but bear in mind you do sacrifice a tiny bit of control when doing this. So it's not as big of a risk versus reward. Very often I find myself dashing, but just bear in mind it is a thing that you can do. While most of the fielding it can be potentially automated, Shy Guy moving right there, that was all automated, which is why I didn't get the 1 out of 3 to go to 2 out of 3. But typically with fielding, if it looks like it's going to be anything that's even a little bit difficult to catch or like maneuver, you're going to be the one that's in control. You're going to want to be the one that's in control. There we go. It doesn't actually want you to catch the ball here, it just wants you to pick it up. It's going to have you do that with the diving catch here. If somebody hits the ball into the field and you are just barely not quite going to reach it in time, you can press A with good timing to make this diving catch. This is definitely a risk versus reward, as if you don't time it well, your character might jump, they might miss the ball, and it is possible still that your character could make an error by unsuccessfully catching the ball. Thankfully, you don't have to catch it necessarily before it hits the ground. As long as you do the diving catch in this example, you should be fine. There's an example of doing it correctly. But of course, if you miss the diving catch altogether, this is going to leave you with a bit of room where you can't move at all for a split second, and this is going to let those runners have that additional opportunity to get farther. It is possible for your fielders to error as well, which means they either get hit by a hazard, either by the field itself, or by something that the batter did, usually a star swing, or they can just straight up make a mistake, as people do in real life. So it is possible for fielders to make errors in most instances. Running, the last stat, probably the easiest one to go over. This is very simple. You press Y to make your characters go forward, you press X to make them go backwards. If you press the opposite of whatever you've been pressing, it will stop them. So you can stop them from advancing and make them go backwards. You can stop them from going backwards and make them advance. Pretty simple. I'm going to be tapping B here as well because you can dash around the bases, which will make stopping a little bit harder, but of course it will make your characters go a little bit faster. You can also move multiple characters at any given time. I'm getting ahead of the tutorials here, but it's fine. You can move everybody with Y, you can move them back with X. You can also move characters individually by, and I'm going to say this slowly, finding the base that the nearest runner will run to and holding down that button for that base and tapping B. What I mean is, if your bases are loaded, for example, in fact, I'm actually going to skip this and show it right here. It says move all runners. Let's say I want to move just Mario, not Yoshi. Mario is going to second base, so I'm holding up for second base and tapping Y, and it just moves Mario. If I want Mario to go back, then I hit the base that I am going to go back to, which is first, and tap X. So I'm holding right and hitting X. Will you need to move characters individually? Very, very rarely. This is kind of used to just juke out the AI. I predominantly use this trying to convince that I'm running for home when I'm not actually running for home plate, and making them try to stop me from scoring, but what I'm actually doing is letting the person that batted get to first base when they had no business getting to first base. They definitely should have gotten thrown out before they got there, but the AI was too focused on preventing me from scoring rather than stopping whoever was running to first base. So this is more of an advanced technique type thing. When you're playing on low difficulties, this probably won't matter. Just know how to advance them, stop them, and make them retreat. If your character hits a fly ball and runners start to go forward, start tapping them back if you think that ball is going to get caught. The reason for this is if a ball gets caught, then every runner has to go back to the base they started on, or else they can get thrown out if the ball gets there before they do. This last option is free play. I'm not going to show this off because there's no need to. Instead, we're going to end things off here. So, again, episode 2 is going to be out pretty much right after this one is. So, by this point, if you've watched all the way through, it probably is out, or it's pretty close to being out, and we're going to be starting challenge mode next time. Again, going to try to keep these videos under 30 minutes. First episode, there's going to be a fair bit to go over, so just bear that in mind. But in the next episode, we'll be doing that. We'll also be talking about our first character bio as well as our first team, because I'm going to be starting with some of the weaker teams and working our way up in terms of their default teams. Till then, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Adios.